My name is Harper, and I'm 36 years old. I live in Vermont with my husband and used to work as a part-time chef for a small restaurant. But now, after undergoing a lung resection surgery due to complications from a prolonged pneumonia, I am just a woman learning how to breathe again from the very beginning. That morning, as I stumbled into the kitchen, my hands still trembling because the oxygen hadn't circulated evenly yet, I reached to pour a glass of water when Brandon walked in. He didn't ask how I was or look at me for even a second. He coldly placed a 3-page sheet of paper on the table and said matter-of-factly, "My family is coming here for Christmas as usual. My mother says you should plan the menu early. They won't eat anything store-bought." I froze, my back still aching from the incision, my breathing ragged beneath the thick sweater. I didn't cry from emotion. I only felt suffocated, not because of my lungs, but because of the indifference. Have you ever been treated like a soulless cooking machine, even when you were fighting to survive every breath? Have you ever been seen by your in-laws as just a shadow in the kitchen, in your own home? Leave a comment if you've ever had to push yourself for imposed traditions. Hit like if you believe women have the right to rest even during the holidays. And subscribe to the channel to hear the rest of my story about the last Christmas, and the payback that my in-laws will never forget. I lay in the hospital bed in early December, the cold so piercing that even thick blankets couldn't keep the spasms in my chest from biting through. My breathing was short and broken. Every deep inhale felt like my body was being squeezed. The lung resection surgery had been performed 2 days earlier. The doctor said that if I had arrived a week later, I might not have survived. I gave a weak smile at the news. Not because I felt lucky to be alive, but because I didn't know if anyone truly cared about that fact besides the doctor. Brandon wasn't there when I woke up. He hadn't come the day before, or the day before that. I called him immediately after the doctor confirmed I was stable, only to hear his even, casual voice through the phone. "I'm taking Mom to the Christmas orchestra at the cathedral. She's been looking forward to this all year." I couldn't say no. "You're okay, right?" I hung up without replying. The words "you're okay" never really belonged to me. They were always placed in my mouth like a free pass so someone else wouldn't have to be present. I stayed in the hospital alone for another 3 days. When the nurses were away, I checked my own pulse, pressed the oxygen button myself, wiped my sweat, and lulled myself to sleep to the sound of wind sweeping against the window. I didn't blame anyone. But that loneliness clung like a thick layer of dust to every thought, impossible to wipe away. On discharge day, no one came to take me home. When the doctor asked if I needed a ride, I nodded. They put me in a clean, quiet, and cold white medical SUV. When the car stopped in front of the house, I stepped down slowly, clutching the small bag in my hands containing medication, bills, and the doctor's orders. No heavy lifting. No climbing stairs. No cooking for at least 6 weeks. I opened the door and stepped inside. The stench of spoiled food rose from the sink piled high with unwashed dishes. On the dining table sat a dried-out pizza box, wrappers scattered across the floor. The refrigerator hummed as if it were exhausted too. I opened it. Empty. No milk, not even a single egg. Brandon was not home. I set the medication bag on the table and walked toward the bedroom, each step forcing myself to forget the feeling of being abandoned. I had no strength left for anger, only a hollowness stretching like the winter darkness that refused to lift. The next morning, as I struggled to lift myself to reach the glass of water on the nightstand, the phone rang. The screen displayed the name, Judith. I sighed. I had never saved her as Mom. I answered. "Harper, my grandchild can't go without the cookies you make for Christmas. Last year, Kylie ate them all in 3 minutes. You can still bake them this year, right?" I paused for a few seconds, staring at the oxygen machine running steadily, the tubing still in my nose. "I just had lung surgery, Mrs. Judith," I said slowly. "The doctor said I need complete rest for 6 weeks. Oh, it's just cookies, Harper. You don't need to exert yourself. You can do it sitting down. Kylie is looking forward to it." Tradition is tradition. I could hear every word clearly. Each syllable felt like a command disguised as a request. "I'll try," I replied, not understanding why I even said it. "Good." Every mother-in-law would be proud of a daughter-in-law like you, she said softly, then hung up without waiting for another word. From me. I set the phone down and leaned my head against the wall. This was the 7th year I had been assigned the task of preparing Christmas for my in-laws. I had done it while running a fever, while bleeding from gum stress, and even the year I lost my first child. Still standing in the kitchen all day because the adults needed the family atmosphere. I once thought that was love. That I was a part of them. But at that moment, with a nearly 8-inch incision stretching painfully every time I moved, I knew, I no longer believed in it. I lay quietly for a while longer, the oxygen machine humming steadily. I remembered the day Brandon came to visit me in the hospital. Only once, after the nurse called repeatedly. He stood at the bedside for less than 10 minutes, asking if I wanted anything to eat, then left because he had to take Mom home. No one asked what I had eaten during the 3 days after that. That afternoon, Brandon came home. He walked in as if everything were perfectly normal, glanced at me sitting with my legs propped on pillows to ease the pain, and said, "Mom wants a roast this year. And Kylie wants cookies like every year. We should plan the menu soon." I turned to look at him. Not with anger or pleading, but with a calmness as if my mind had already moved far beyond that room. "Do you see the oxygen machine beeping?" I asked. He looked up, surprised. "Oh, you're still using that?" I didn't answer. In my mind, a thought was forming, not anger, not pain. Just the idea that perhaps it was time I could no longer continue as before. And maybe, this holiday would be the last time I was forced into the role of the traditional servant. Next time, if anyone needed serving, maybe it would be them. I still remember my first year as a daughter-in-law. I had only been living with Brandon for 2 months when Thanksgiving arrived. I hadn't even hung our wedding photo on the wall when Judith called, 3 times in a single day, her cheerful voice barely hiding the command, "Harper, our family has a tradition of big dinners. You're the daughter-in-law, so of course you'll handle the cooking. Don't worry, I'll bring the wine." I thought that was a sign of trust. That I was recognized as part of the family. I spent 4 days preparing. 12 main dishes, 3 desserts, all made by hand. I wasn't familiar with the kitchen at his house, and no one helped me. Brandon said, "You're good at this. Mom will be impressed." The day of the holiday arrived. Everyone praised me endlessly. But I couldn't taste any of the food. I only remembered my feet swelling from standing too long, my back aching from constant bending. While everyone sat at the long table laughing, I quietly went to the bathroom, locked the door, and collapsed onto the toilet seat. My eyes were red from the kitchen smoke, my hands blistered from hot water. I breathed deeply and reassured myself, I can do this. This is my new family. I repeated that phrase in my head for many years afterward. One year, I cooked for Easter right after undergoing ovarian cyst surgery. I hadn't fully recovered, my abdomen still bandaged, and the doctor had ordered absolute rest for at least 2 weeks. Yet Judith called on the Monday morning of that week, laughing lightly, "We've invited the entire extended family. Harper, just make the usual dishes. It'll be simple." I didn't dare say no. I was afraid of making Brandon uncomfortable. I was afraid people would think I was lazy. I was afraid of ruining the family tradition. I remember every slow step from the bedroom to the kitchen, every time I bent down to pick up a spoon, feeling like my stomach was tearing open. I couldn't eat anything that day. Yet I still cleared the table, forced a smile when someone complimented the peach pie, and took a family memory photo while inside my body hurt so much my hands trembled, barely able to hold a glass of wine. But perhaps the memory I remember most clearly is the 3rd Christmas. I was 11 weeks pregnant. Neither Brandon nor I had told anyone. We planned to announce it after Christmas. But 2 days before the holiday, I started having abdominal pain and bleeding. I went to the hospital, and the doctor said I had miscarried. I went home, stunned, as if the whole world had slipped through my fingers. Brandon hugged me, telling me to rest. But the next morning he bent down to kiss my forehead and said, "Mom has been planning all month. You don't have to do much, just bake the pies and help set the table." I don't understand why I nodded. Maybe I no longer had the reasoning to refuse. Or maybe I thought if I kept living normally, the pain would feel smaller. I baked a batch of pies through tears, stirred sauces with a foggy mind, and set the table like a machine. But no one noticed. No one asked if I was okay. No one saw my red eyes or my trembling hands. All they saw was that I was still cooking, still serving, so everything was fine. Harper is just an extension of my kitchen. Judith had joked during that dinner, making the whole table laugh. I stood in the kitchen, hands washing dishes, feeling a chill run through me as I heard that. Not because of the words she used, but because Brandon laughed along. He said nothing. Didn't protest. Didn't stand up. Didn't look at me. He just bent over his plate as if he hadn't heard a thing. I went to the bathroom afterward. And I vomited until I was exhausted. Not from the food, but from the suffocating anger. I still remember the smell of antiseptic that day, the scent of cheap hand soap, and the murmur of voices in the living room outside. I sat on the floor, clutching my empty stomach, thinking, I wish someone would notice that I didn't eat a single bite. When I told Brandon about it that evening, he just sighed and said, "You're too sensitive. That's tradition. Everyone has to play their part." I didn't respond. I just turned away, hugging a pillow, feeling the room grow cold in a way I had never known. 7 years. I had served for 7 years. Behind Judith's smile, Kayla's fake compliments, and Corbin's perfunctory pat on the shoulder, I was just the one standing in the kitchen. I used to think I was part of that family. But in reality, I was only maintaining for them the sense of warmth they had never created themselves. Now, with my incision still unhealed and the oxygen tank always at my side, I looked back on those memories as if seeing them reflected in cold water. And I began to understand. I was not weak. I was not overly sensitive. I was just too accustomed to no one seeing my pain. I sat on the edge of the bed, sunlight slanting through the thin curtains, highlighting the still red scars across my abdomen. The wind outside was cold and dry, carrying the scent of young pine and fallen leaves. Each breath I took made my left lung tighten in rhythm, while my right lung stretched to compensate. I had grown used to the feeling, but I had never grown used to the indifference. My phone buzzed. A message from Kayla appeared on the lock screen. "Don't forget the cranberry sauce has to be homemade. Mom can't stand store-bought." I looked at the words and set the phone aside without unlocking it. A minute later it buzzed again. It was Judith. "This year there's also Corbin's new boyfriend. You should try something really impressive." I laughed, but the laugh sounded like metal dropping on cold stone. Not warm, not funny, just hollow. A sharp pain shot under my chest as I laughed too hard, forcing me to grasp the edge of the bed to keep my balance. I reached for my phone, opened the recording function and pressed record. At that moment, I didn't think much. I just knew I needed to save it. To document. To capture every word, every sentence. Because one day I wanted proof of everything they treated as obvious. I named the recording, Evidence, Holiday Abuse. Just as I saved it, the phone rang again. It was a video call from Judith. I couldn't decline before her face appeared on the screen. "Harper, are you okay? You look a bit pale," Judith said, her voice unnervingly gentle. "I just had surgery less than 3 weeks ago, ma'am," I replied, keeping my tone calm. "Yes, that little lung procedure. I told you I'm not good with medical terms. My mother had 13 children and never complained once." I remained silent. "Anyway," she continued, "I want this Christmas to be really grand. You know, last year people still complained that the vegetables weren't arranged symmetrically. I think we should add lemon-baked salmon. Corbin's new boyfriend loves it. You've made salmon before, right?" "I'm still in post-surgery recovery. The doctor doesn't allow me to stand in the kitchen," I said bluntly. "You always find an excuse. What the doctor forbids you." "Did the doctor forbid you from laughing, from talking, from seeing delicious food?" I took a slow, deep breath, trying to stay composed. "Harper," Judith added, "being a woman in the family sometimes means knowing how to sacrifice. I've done it my whole life. You never lost a child at Christmas," I blurted, my voice catching. There was a brief, tense silence on the other end. "That has nothing to do with it," she replied curtly. Just prepare as usual. I'll bring wine and flowers. You handle the menu. I hung up without saying another word. My hands clenched so tightly the skin turned white. I sat very still for a long time, listening to the oxygen machine quietly running beside me. Each rotation was a reminder. I am still breathing. I am alive. But living like this, is it any different? I opened the recording app, played back the conversation, and I did not skip my own voice. I heard the resignation, the forced endurance, and part of a long-worn fatigue that had become routine. I needed to break free. Not for revenge, but to truly exist. I opened the folder creation app on my computer. I named it Holiday Abuse. Inside, I placed each recording, each message, each image documenting unreasonable demands spanning 7 years. There were even pictures of me in the hospital next to the doctor's orders. No labor. I added a note. History will not repeat if those involved do not remain silent. That evening, Brandon returned home. He walked in quietly as usual, making no noise, offering no greeting. I sat in the living room, blanket draped across my stomach, eyes fixed on the computer screen. Brandon stopped when he saw me opening the medical bill files and messages from Kayla and Judith. "What are you doing?" he asked, a hint of caution in his voice. "Documenting," I replied without turning. "Documenting what?" "Everything. What everyone said. What I did. And what I endured." He laughed, a strained, awkward laugh. "You're overreacting. It's just a nice dinner, that's all." I vomited blood in the bathroom after preparing a nice dinner for 23 people. "Your mother said I was overdoing it. And you said that's tradition." Brandon didn't respond. I looked straight at him. "I won't do any more. If you and the family want a perfect dinner, prepare it yourselves." He opened his mouth to say something, but I raised my hand to stop him. "I won't do it again. And I'm recording everything, so that when they ask why, I can point directly to this evidence." I turned back to the screen, played the most recent recording, letting him hear Judith's voice saying, "You always find an excuse." I pressed stop. "One thing," I said softly like the wind, "my excuse is to live. And I choose to live my way." I pressed send on the last audio file, then leaned back into the chair, my chest still aching beneath the loose sweater. Outside, snow began to fall lightly onto the windowsill. Each flake melted instantly on the glass as if leaving no trace at all. Just like over the past 7 years, I had quietly disappeared after every holiday, after every exhausting stint in the kitchen, only to smile as if nothing had happened. I picked up my phone and opened my contacts. One name sat in old contacts, someone I hadn't spoken to in over 2 years. Lena Martin. My college friend, now a lawyer specializing in women's rights and the author of the popular blog Women Don't Serve. I pressed call. "I've been thinking about you all week." Lena answered after 3 rings, her voice as assertive as when we were in school together. "How are you? I heard about the surgery. I was going to message, but I didn't want to bother you." I let out a small, quiet laugh. "You're not bothering me," I replied. "I'm calling because I think it's time." Lena was silent for a few seconds before asking, "You're talking about Brandon, right?" I nodded, as if she were sitting right in front of me. "I've had enough. Harper, don't be mad if I ask straight. Why haven't you left him yet?" I bit my lip. I think I got used to it. Or I used to think I had. Used to being treated like a servant? No, used to no one standing by me. Lena sighed. "Now you have someone." I was silent. Her words came unexpectedly, and because of that, my chest ached sharply. Like a hug squeezing right where it was bruised. But I let myself feel it without avoiding it. "I have an idea," Lena said after a moment. "You don't have to endure this holiday again. If they want Christmas like tradition, then let them remember it. For a long time." I squinted, tilting my head slightly. "What do you mean?" "The last Christmas. And a perfect ending." I sat up straighter instinctively. "You can help me. Not just help, I'll lead the way." Lena's voice was sharp and confident. "Step 1 is to get you off that stage. You need a real retreat. No kitchen, no doorbells, no Judith's heels stomping on the hardwood. And if they sue me for leaving, I asked, half joking. I'm a lawyer, Harper. I've been waiting for the day I could deal with Judith on paper for a long time. I laughed, a sound lighter than the hissing of the oxygen machine. It had been so long since anyone said something like that, thinking of me first. The next day, Lena sent me a list of 3 lodges near the northern Vermont National Forest. All were quiet, private, staffed with medical personnel, and gave no indication that Christmas was coming. I chose Cabin 3 by the lake, with its own kitchen but also on-call chef services. Lena booked it for me from December 24th to January 2nd. What about here? I asked. They still think I'm preparing the feast. Let them think, Lena replied. And we'll make something even more impressive than any dish your sister-in-law demanded. We started planning. Phase 1. Gathering evidence. I set up small cameras in the kitchen, living room and hallways, not for revenge, but to document the truth. I extracted audio clips from my phone and organized them chronologically. Clips of Judith calling me a kitchen accessory, messages from Kayla scolding me as irresponsible for not replying within 2 minutes. I even had Brandon telling me, "Don't make a big deal," when I had to be hospitalized a second time for post-surgical complications. I compiled it all into a folder titled Truth, Harper. Lena carefully backed everything up to a USB drive and cloud storage, sending a copy to her law office. She also told me to photograph my incision, prescriptions, and stamped medical reports. All would be attached in case the other side reacted unreasonably after the upcoming special feast. Looking at all that material, I felt like I was building a new house. Not with bricks, but with the truths I had been forced to swallow silently for 7 years. I asked Lena, "Am I overdoing it?" She looked at me for a long moment before answering. "No, you're not overdoing it. You're protecting yourself. The scary part isn't the Christmas dinner. It's people getting used to seeing your endurance as part of the menu." I nodded. My heart still beat slowly, but steadier whenever Lena was on the call. The next day, I began making a list of restaurants open on December 25th. Not easy, but I persisted. I called each one, confirming delivery times, costs, special menus. I used the secondary credit card Brandon had given me 2 years ago, which he had forgotten he had authorized. In my planning spreadsheet I wrote, each person one taste, each dish one origin, each order a proof of freedom. I called it the last Christmas plan. And for the first time in my life as a daughter-in-law, I looked forward to December 25th. Not because of a gift, but because of the gift I was about to give myself. I opened the credit card statement Brandon had shown me earlier in the year, when he boasted about being promoted and having the authority to use the company card for some flexible expenses. Back then, I had just nodded, still trusting the notion of shared responsibility, believing the husband I had chosen still knew the line between shared funds and personal gain. But that afternoon, as I entered the Christmas delivery information into my detailed plan, I realized I needed to review financial limits. I didn't want to reveal any traces too early. Every step I took had to be neat and discreet, just like how they had previously disregarded my existence. I logged into the secondary card account Brandon thought I had never used. A few small transactions appeared first. Flower shop, Italian restaurant, downtown bar. I scrolled past them without much thought until I saw 4 consecutive charges from the same address. Maple Garden Residences, Unit 708. The first was a deposit, the next 2 were monthly payments. The fourth was a furniture fee. Total $7,340 in just the past 2 months. My heart skipped a beat, but I wasn't surprised. No shock, no frantic questions like before. I slowly opened a search tab and looked up that address. A luxury apartment 15 minutes from my place. This address had appeared in a message Brandon sent me 2 months prior, saying he had to meet a real estate client. At the time, I had just returned from a clinic after an extended treatment for recurring lung infections. I typed Maple Garden Unit 708, along with the keyword Brandon. A social media page appeared, showing a young woman with light brown hair, a photo of a red wine glass on the balcony, with the caption, "Love the evenings listening to him tell me things only I know." The poster's name, Marissa Langley. I had never heard this name in the 7 years we had lived together. but her profile picture included Brandon. His face tilted toward hers, eyes no longer the man who had silently watched me serve the entire family while I bled inside. I didn't feel jealousy. I didn't feel anger. I only felt right. Right about every vague unease that had sent shivers down my spine, every excuse he made for being late, every distracted look whenever I asked about the weekend. I placed my hand on the mouse and opened a new folder on my computer, next to holiday abuse. I named it Divorce Phase. Inside, I pasted screenshots of credit card statements, social media account links, transaction screenshots, and even Brandon's profile picture. Each piece of evidence like a brick laid down on the ground I was about to step onto. Not to crush anyone, but so I could stand firm. After saving everything, I sat up straight, opened my phone, and called a special contact Lena had given me a few days earlier. I need someone discreet, efficient, who can track and verify all my husband's movements over the next 2 weeks, I said when the line picked up. A man's voice, low and steady, answered, "My name is Cole. I've worked plenty of divorce cases. Do you need phone, car, or work schedule tracking? I need to know where he goes after office hours, who he meets, how long he stays, and how much he spends," I replied firmly. "No need for daily reports. Just proof and verified photos. I'll send over a confidentiality agreement. Do you need these for legal filing?" "I need them for freedom." I hung up, then sat still in the fading afternoon light against the glass. No anger left, no urge to fight for anything. I didn't want Brandon back. I didn't need his regret. I just needed to walk out of this house with my head high and no doubt in my chest. The next morning, Cole emailed to confirm he had begun surveillance at the start of the day. Attached was a photo of Brandon parking at a quiet cafe near the lake, with Marissa. They sat close, his hand resting on the back of her chair, his face more relaxed than I'd ever seen at any holiday he spent with me. I saved everything into my folder. Each photo, each piece of data was a slice of a picture coming into sharp focus. No more reasons needed. No more explanations. That night, Brandon came home late, not bothering to look at me. He tossed his coat onto the chair and muttered the familiar line. "Busy day. I'm not eating dinner." I answered with just one sentence. "That's fine, neither am I." He didn't react. Maybe he was too used to me speaking little. Or maybe his head was already with Marissa, with Unit 708. I watched him go upstairs, his stride the same as 7 years ago, but my heart no longer walked beside him. I turned back to the computer, opening my restaurant list. I had added 2 more, one vegetarian place, one Indian restaurant with full-course meals, and a gluten-free spot for Kayla. All confirmed delivery right at noon on December 25th. Clear note, deliver to Judith Weber. I checked my budget sheet again. Each order was color-coded, easy to track and present if needed. The total amount I charged on Brandon's secondary card for this delivery feast was just under $800. Every dollar used like a stitch in the wound I was healing for myself. I picked up my phone, sent a message to Lena. "Everything's ready. You still have the retreat contract, right?" Her reply came in less than a minute. "Keys, GPS map, and that ceramic tea set you love. Cabin 3 has been warmed since this morning." I looked at that message, feeling my chest ease a little. I still hurt, but I knew exactly where the pain was taking me. And this time, I would not turn back. I rose early on the morning of the 23rd, wind howling through the branches outside, as if urging me to begin the final phase of the plan I'd been preparing for nearly a month. Brandon had left the night before to stay at his parents' because he had to pick Corbin up from the airport early. I didn't ask, didn't react. I just nodded. His schedule was perfect for me to act. At exactly 8 a.m., Lena knocked on the door. She carried 2 rolls of tape, a stack of full-color menus nearly an inch thick, and a bag of coffee from my favorite shop. "Got a playlist ready to work to?" she teased with a knowing smile. "I've been ready since they started writing the menu for me," I answered, taking the coffee cup. We began in the dining room. I pulled out the wooden frame Judith had given me that first Christmas, once holding a family photo by the tree. I slipped the photo out, replacing it with each printed menu: vegetarian courses from the Indian restaurant, gluten-free entrees for Kayla, premium, seafood for Corbin's new boyfriend. Each frame was a declaration, "I've heard enough. Now it's your turn to read." Lena handled the tape, plastering menus onto every surface visible upon entering. Cabinet doors, counters, the oven front, the backs of dining chairs. She even hung a handwritten board above the main table. Self-service. Everyone gets their own taste. If unsatisfied, please contact the surgeon or your own heart. We both paused when it was up. Neither of us spoke. We just looked at each other and exhaled, lighter. I pulled a small box from under the stairs. Inside were the cards I'd written one by one the night before. Not greetings. Personal messages. Aimed straight at each person's blind spot. Kayla's card read, "Hope you enjoy the dish you demanded, delivered on time." As for me, I've delivered back every unreasonable expectation starting today. Corbin said, "Your new partner will eat his favorite meal." I once lost a child and still roasted a turkey when you told me, "Rest after dinner." And Judith, hers was a red envelope, placed right on the head chair she'd claimed year after year. Inside, one line, "You once called me an extension of the kitchen. The kitchen is now closed. Permanently." Lena was silent after reading them. She placed a hand on my shoulder, her gaze soft. "You're not just teaching them a lesson. You're rewriting the meaning of your silence." I didn't answer. I turned away, pulled out the fine white porcelain plates Judith had once forced on me because paper plates are disrespectful to elders. I set each plate with a menu on top, and on each, I left a napkin folded into a heart. "For the family love they love to preach," I said. Lena laughed, shaking her head. Cold in the most poetic way. Near noon, the first delivery arrived. A man from a Mediterranean restaurant stood at the door with 8 steaming boxes, rich with herbs and olive oil. "Mrs. Weber?" he asked, eyeing me suspiciously. "I'll just sign. Leave the rest on the dining table," I replied politely. Then came Indian, Japanese, Italian. Each delivery was placed exactly where I instructed, and I tipped as Lena had advised 20% for each order. On Brandon's card, I checked my budget one final time. A total of $837, including tips and printing. Not a cent beyond what Brandon had blown in a single night of company parties with Marissa. I placed a pot of tea and one last menu on a tray. On it, I wrote, "Menu for Harper. Quiet, no cooking smells, no one calling me by the wrong name." By late afternoon, Lena and I packed away personal items. Not moving out. Just putting them out of sight. I wanted to leave nothing behind but what they had to face. I checked the suitcase Lena had helped me prepare the night before. Warm clothes, medicine, a binder of evidence photos, the retreat contract, a journal, and a card Lena had written for me. "May your first free Christmas be so peaceful no one calls you anything but Harper." I slipped the card into the smallest pocket of my coat, close to my left chest. By nightfall I made my final checks. The Ring camera at the front door was fully charged. Every recording from the past days stored securely. I left a printed copy of my medical order on the kitchen counter, next to the vase Judith had once forced me to fill to match the holiday tones. The flowers had wilted. I left them as a reminder that some things were gone, and no water or apology could revive them. I texted Lena, "Tomorrow 9:45. On time." She replied with a sunrise emoji and the words, "Ready for a new dawn." I turned off my phone, shut every light in the house except the bright dining lamp, casting gold across the menus taped everywhere like shards of mirror reflecting a truth someone had ignored for 7 years. Tomorrow morning, they would arrive. I would not be there to greet them. I sat in the small cabin by the lake, morning sun filtering through thin curtains, making everything look warmer than it was. In front of me, a small checkered tea table held a steaming mug of cocoa Lena had just made. My laptop sat on my lap, Ring app open. From the front door and dining room cameras, I could watch everything unfolding in the house I once called home. 9:58. Lena pulled up a chair, broke a cookie, and sipped her tea. "Have they arrived yet?" I tilted the screen toward her. "Almost. Judith has never been late." At exactly 10 a.m., like clockwork, Judith's white SUV parked neatly in front. She stepped out holding snow-dusted flowers, frowning at the silent, unopened door. Kayla jumped from the back seat, immediately scowling. Corbin followed slowly, dragging a cooler, with his new boyfriend behind him, bleached hair, bright red coat. Brandon was last to step out. He wore a scarf, but his unease was plain as he stared at the quiet house, no one waiting to welcome them. I zoomed in, switched on the audio. "Where's Victoria?" Judith snapped. "You texted she was handling everything." "Mom, let me try the door," Brandon muttered. He slid the key into the lock, pushed the door open first. The others trailed behind. I switched to the indoor feed. "Oh my God." Judith screamed the moment she saw the dining room. Lena and I glanced at each other, then back at the screen. Menus were plastered across every wall, every chair, every smallest corner of the room. In the middle of the dining table sat a note written in thick black marker: "Self-service. Everyone gets their own taste. If unsatisfied, please contact your surgeon." Corbin muttered, "You've got to be kidding me." Kayla looked around, her eyes a mix of shock and fury. "No turkey, no prepped food? What is this?" "A restaurant menu," Corbin's boyfriend asked, baffled. Judith's face turned crimson, her voice sharp. Victoria, what on earth is this stunt? We showed up on time. Where's the turkey? Where are the desserts?" Brandon stepped into the dining room, looking around, his hand trembling as he noticed every plate neatly set with a folded card on top. He opened his first. Inside was one short line. "You once said, 'It's just a minor surgery, don't make a fuss.'" I remembered. I saw his face change instantly. His eyes darted around, unsettled, as if searching for me in a room that no longer belonged to me. "What is this supposed to mean?" Judith shrieked, clutching the red card set on the head chair. I knew it was hers. The italic words glared clearly on camera. "You once said I was nothing more than an extension of the kitchen. Well, the kitchen is closed. Permanently." Kayla screamed. "Who does she think she is? Leaving us with this takeout garbage? Is she really that ungrateful?" Corbin opened one of the boxes, staring at the roasted salmon with vegetables. "At least it smells pretty good." His boyfriend nodded. "Still warm too. Great service." Judith glared at them both, then turned to Brandon. Call her right now. She thinks this is smart?" Brandon pulled out his phone. My number flashed on the screen. He called 3 times in a row. I didn't answer. I simply opened another app and sent him a voice message. "I can't take your call right now. I'm recovering. And I'm learning not to let anyone turn me into the shadow of an oven again." I saw him stop, head bowed, then read the message slowly. Judith exhaled hard as if deeply insulted. "Unbelievable," she hissed. "A decent woman would never do this to her family." "Then maybe I don't need to be decent in that way anymore," I whispered, almost as if speaking to the screen itself. Lena chuckled softly. "Want to send a group message? Like a holiday greeting?" I nodded, opened the group chat, and typed, "I'm sorry if anyone's surprised. But I've spent too many years enduring what you all call tradition. To me it was neglect. Today I choose rest. I choose life. I choose myself." I hit send. The camera caught Brandon reading the message first. Then Kayla, her face flushing red. Corbin dropped his gaze, silent. Judith stood frozen, hands trembling as she clutched the red card. Finally, Kayla shouted, "She'll have to apologize. Nobody treats family like this and just walks away." I opened another recording and sent one more message. "I'm not walking away like nothing happened. I'm leaving after enduring too many things nobody ever cared about." I looked at Lena. She smiled gently. "You don't need to say anything else," she told me. I nodded and closed the laptop. Inside the cabin, it was so quiet I could hear my heartbeat steady and calm. I wasn't worried about which dish had to be cooked first, who was vegetarian, who had allergies, or who hated canned food. I just needed to breathe. And I knew that on the other side of the screen, the people who once assumed I'd always keep the holiday fire burning were finally tasting what it felt like to walk into a feast without a host. A feast of truth. On the morning of the 26th, I sat by the cabin window, snow falling quietly outside like fragments of memory drifting down over the house I had left behind. My phone buzzed nonstop with dozens of new notifications. Lena walked in carrying a steaming mug of ginger tea, set it on the table, and grinned. "You're famous now, Harper," she said, half proud, half amused. I raised an eyebrow. "Famous?" My post went up on the blog last night. By this morning, it's been shared over 200,000 times. And guess what? The subreddit on women's rights is exploding with talk about the woman who walked out on Christmas to teach her family a lesson about boundaries. I took the mug, my hand trembling with emotion. "What did you write?" "Just the truth," Lena shrugged. The title was, "Christmas and the Price of Cruel Traditions." I wrote about you, no name, no address, but told how you were forced to cook for over 20 people after losing your child. How you dragged yourself from bed after surgery to bake because your mother-in-law said no pie means no Christmas. And then I described the meal with 6 different menus all ordered from an app that your family had to consider pie meals and serve themselves. I gave a small smile, bittersweet. "Sounds like a novel. But lived by a very real woman," she said warmly. My phone kept buzzing. I opened Reddit. Someone had summarized Lena's blog in a witty but sharp tone and tagged it "Christmas Takeout Revolution." In the comments, thousands of women shared their own stories being forced to clean while undergoing cancer treatment, cooking while their hands were in casts, quietly enduring because they didn't want to ruin the holiday spirit. I read each line with a lump in my throat. I wasn't alone. Silence, it turned out, was the apron they had been forced to wear. Private messages poured in. A local station in Vermont sent an invitation for an interview. They wanted me on a Sunday morning show to discuss the line between tradition and coercion during the holidays. Lena watched with me, just as excited. "You gonna say yes?" I sat quietly for a moment, then nodded slowly. "If I don't speak up for myself, more women will keep thinking that suffering is part of family love." She smiled. "Then I'll be your press secretary." That afternoon, Lena forwarded me an email from her source. Brandon was under internal investigation after anonymous reports with proof that he'd used company funds for personal expenses, including an apartment at Maple Garden and expensive dinners with a woman named Marissa. I didn't ask who sent the tip. Lena only shrugged, eyes unreadable. I didn't need to know. What mattered was that truth had finally come to light. That evening, Brandon was suspended. Marissa, according to Cole, the private investigator I had hired, had emailed HR herself, stating she had no idea Brandon was married. She deleted all photos with him from social media. Her account went private overnight. I felt neither glee nor bitterness. Everything arrived in its own time, as naturally as someone who had endured in silence could ever hope for. My phone rang again. An unknown number. I let it ring before picking up. "This is Harper," I said softly. The voice on the other end cut sharp like metal. "This is Judith." I stayed silent. "You think you've done something great?" She pressed on without pause. "My whole family is being humiliated online. Brandon almost lost his job. Corbin's friends are mocking him for not knowing how to cook. Kayla's being dragged on Facebook. And me, I'm being called a toxic mother-in-law." I didn't answer. Judith's voice cracked with anger. "You betrayed this family. I took you in when you had nothing but a few recipes picked up from trade school. And you dare disrupt an American tradition?" At that moment, I calmly said, "I'm not causing chaos. I'm just done enduring what everyone calls tradition but is really exploitation wrapped up with a red bow." She gasped on the other end of the line. "I disown you." "Thank you," I replied. "That saves us both time." I hung up without waiting for another word. Lena sat nearby, not asking who I had been talking to. She just reached out, placed her hand over mine. Everyone needs one moment when they dare to step outside the door that once kept them locked in silence. I held her hand, looking out at the lake. Snow was still falling, soft white flakes resting on the still water, like the past gently going to sleep so I could keep moving forward. In that moment, peace didn't come from someone understanding me. It came because finally, I understood myself. I returned to the house that used to be ours on a morning in mid-January, not out of longing, not out of regret. I came back with a clear purpose to end it. This house, where I once collapsed in the kitchen from stabbing pain caused by cysts, where I once cooked dinner for 20 people right after a miscarriage, where I once whispered into my pillow, "If I can just get through this holiday, I'll be okay." Now I came back not to live, but to put down a final period. I walked in with my lawyer, Ellis, a sharp, steady woman in her 40s. In my hand was a bag filled with records, medical reports, surgical photos, financial statements, printed transcripts of recordings, voicemails, emails, and the signed divorce papers. Everything was prepared, down to the last detail. Brandon was already there, sitting at the head of the table, face gaunt, hair disheveled, his eyes stripped of that lazy confidence he once wore. Beside him sat Judith, face cold as stone, a black felt hat still on her head even indoors, as if she were clinging to a rotten sense of dignity. Kayla sat at the corner of the table, silent. I didn't see Corbin or the others. Maybe they lacked the courage, or maybe they weren't relevant enough to face the truth dragged into daylight. I pulled out a chair, placed my bag on the table, and carefully laid out each document. No one spoke. Even Judith stayed uncharacteristically quiet, her eyes carrying a flicker of caution. Ellis spoke first, her voice calm yet solid as wood. "We're here to finalize the last steps. Harper has signed the divorce papers. We've attached all supporting documents for legal grounds, including evidence of emotional abuse, neglect of marital responsibilities, financial misconduct, and infidelity." Brandon blinked. I placed an X-ray photo on the table. My lungs after surgery. Kayla leaned forward slightly, staring at the image, then turned to me, her eyes catching on the faint scar still visible beneath my collar. I didn't need many words. I only left one line, clear and undeniable. I served 7 holiday seasons in pain. Now, I'm recovering. From a toxic family. Brandon opened his mouth, his voice breaking. "Harper, please listen. I know I was wrong. I should never have left you alone in the hospital. I didn't think it would go this far." I met his eyes. Calm. No anger. No waiting for an apology. "No, you didn't think at all. That's the problem." Judith shot up, speaking as though straining not to burst apart. "You're really going to destroy this family over one Christmas dinner?" I turned to her. "Not one dinner. 7 years. Every single holiday when I wasn't allowed to be weak, wasn't allowed to be absent, wasn't allowed to say, 'I'm tired.'" Kayla lowered her head, fingers gripping the edge of the table. Brandon still tried to cling to a sliver of hope. "We can fix this. I'll change. I'll turn my back on Mom. I'll step away from the company if that's what you want. Harper, just come home." I let out a soft laugh. I saw him not as the man who once walked into the bathroom while I vomited blood and only sighed, "Hurry up, I'm watching the game." I gently pushed the prepared file toward him. "You don't need to step away from anything. Because this house now belongs to me." Judith shot up again. "What?" Ellis answered for me, her tone steady. "The plaintiff has provided sufficient evidence of neglect during postoperative recovery, being forced into household labor against medical condition, and marital assets being used for extramarital affairs. Accordingly, Harper retains ownership of this house, and a portion of company assets in the division." Brandon didn't react. There was nothing left to react to. He lowered his head, no longer the man who once told me with a dismissive smile, "Don't be dramatic. Every woman goes through this." Judith tried to argue, but Kayla suddenly stood. Her voice was soft, yet carried clearly. "I don't think I can defend you this time, Mom." The room fell silent. Judith stared at her daughter, lips pressed tight, but no one said another word. There was nothing left to salvage. I stood. All papers had been signed. Copies handed to Brandon's lawyer to process at court. I needed nothing else but the small handbag I had brought. Before stepping out the door, I looked back one last time. This house will no longer smell like baked goods, no longer echo with fake laughter at the table, no longer force a woman to stand by the oven while her stitches are still bleeding. If you want to call that a loss, I call it cleansing. I walked away. Wind swept through the hall from outside, cold but not biting. The sky was pale gray, no snow falling, but lighter than any day before. Lena was waiting in the car. She opened the door without asking. I sat down, leaning back. Okay? She asked softly. I nodded. Better than any Christmas in the past 7 years. Now I'm sitting in a corner of a small cafe on the hillside in Ashland, Oregon. Outside the window, a row of pines veiled in thin morning mist looked like a delicate scarf. In my hands, a steaming cup of hot chocolate with a smooth layer of whipped cream on top. I'm sitting between Lena and two other women, Allison and Priya, once strangers, now closer than any blood relatives. 1 year ago, on Christmas morning, I packed a bag and left the house that had trapped me in 7 years of holidays. 1 year later, I'm here, free, no longer burdened by tradition, by roles, by the expectations that taught women sacrifice was the definition of love. Lena, this cinnamon smells amazing. I smiled, turning to her. You were right. Winter doesn't have to be cold. She winked. As long as there are no reminders about homemade cranberry sauce. We all burst into laughter. Allison, a 45-year-old nurse from Montana, poured more coffee into her cup and leaned back against the upholstered chair, her voice warm. Last year, my mother-in-law scolded me in front of the whole table just because I forgot to peel the shrimp in the cocktail. It felt like being stripped naked in the middle of a market. This year, she sent an invitation again, but I replied with a single word, no. Priya sipped her ginger tea, her eyes bright behind round glasses. She had once been a high school teacher in Sacramento, enduring 3 holiday seasons cooking while wrapping bandages around her wrists from arthritis. For the first time in my life, she said, I bought myself a ticket to a Christmas concert. And I cried, not from sadness, but because I finally felt like I existed. I nodded, then took out my phone. A message had just arrived. The sender's name appeared, Kayla. I opened it. A short line, no emojis, but heavy all the same. I'm sorry. I didn't know it was that bad. I'm being pressured by Mom too. Can you forgive me? I stared at the screen for a long while. Memories resurfaced, Kayla smiling brightly while I brought out a tray of hot pastries, never asking if I had eaten. She had stayed silent when my mother-in-law scolded me at the table for using store-bought sauce. She had once sent me lists of every dish I had to prepare, as if I were a hired cook. But now, she was the only one brave enough to send an apology. I typed a line, then paused. Thought a moment, erased it, rewrote. I'm not angry. I was once deeply hurt. But then I realized, everyone is a victim if they lack the courage to step out of the mold their family forces on them. I've chosen a new family for myself, the people who truly love me. And I started by learning to love myself first. I hit send, then set the phone down. Outside, the sun had risen higher, casting soft golden rays through the glass, illuminating the floating dust motes in the cozy cafe. No one spoke for a few minutes, as if each of us was holding a silence just for ourselves. Lena suddenly clapped her hands on the table, making everyone jump. Come on, holiday heroines. It's time to open the Live True Today box. I laughed. You've come up with another quirky name again. Each of us had a small box, decorated according to our own personality. Inside were handwritten slips of paper we had written at the beginning of December, things we wanted to try, to quit, to face, or to keep just for ourselves this holiday season. Not lifelong resolutions. Just for one season. Priya opened the first box. She pulled out a slip and read aloud. I will not apologize when I say no to an invitation. Allison reached for hers next. I will choose my own dinner table. And if no one invites me, I'll set up on the balcony with wine and lights. Then it was my turn. I pulled out a folded slip. The handwriting was my own, slightly tilted. I will not go back to being the invisible cook in anyone's life. I lifted my head, meeting each woman's gaze. I used to think I was only the organizer, the server, the cleaner. But today I am the one living. Lena smiled. From now on, we don't just celebrate Christmas. We live Christmas. In our own way. Outside the window, a few children had just left the town's art class, holding watercolor paintings, laughing as they ran down the slope. A little red-haired girl with rosy cheeks waved at us through the glass. I waved back, my hand still wrapped around the warm chocolate mug. I didn't know what next Christmas would look like. Maybe I'd travel. Maybe I'd teach a baking class. Maybe I'd do nothing at all but sleep in and read books. But one thing I knew for certain. I wouldn't force myself anymore. I wouldn't abandon myself just to be called a good daughter-in-law, a considerate wife, or a capable woman. I only wanted to be Harper, the woman sitting in a small cafe, laughing with friends, not cooking, not cleaning, not afraid. And that to me was enough. My story could be the story of so many of us, those who have tried to please everyone in the family while forgetting ourselves. But sooner or later, we must ask, am I living my own life, or just playing a role in someone else's expectations? Have you ever found yourself in a situation like mine? Have you ever felt like the only one standing in the kitchen while everyone else enjoyed the party? Have you ever been called selfish simply for daring to put your health and happiness first? Share your thoughts in the comments. I would truly love to hear your story. And if you believe that each of us deserves a holiday season where we are genuinely loved, where we can live true to ourselves, hit follow on the channel. There are many more heartfelt, authentic stories ahead about family, courage, hurt, and renewal waiting for you to discover. Thank you for listening until the very end. Wishing you a warm day in the way you truly deserve.